Good evening. Can you also see me? I hope so.
Yes.
Yes.
Hello, it's nice to see everyone. Good evening, Joanne. Good evening, Rajab.
Good evening.
We're still waiting for Father James. Okay, so very warm welcome to everyone from my side. My name is Claudia Bues. I work for the Outreach, Education and Research Division here at Mission 21. I'm very pleased to welcome everyone. I see there's already quite a crowd that is participating to this webinar. That's very nice to see. On this International Day of Peace, we would like to talk about the peace process in South Sudan, and a very warm welcome from my side to all the panelists, especially Father James Oyet Latancio. Maybe you can just say hello so people see your face.
Hello, thank you for being with you on this webinar.
Thank you, Father James. Then we have Rajab Mohandis joining us also from South Sudan. You have to say something, Rajab, so the screen switches to you.
Oh, yes. Hi, everyone. I'm happy to join in this webinar.
And also Joanne Holigan joining us also from South Sudan.
Hello, everyone.
Then I would also like to introduce my colleague, Christian Weber, who also works with me at the Outreach, Education and Research Division. He will be helping me out with the technical side of things in case anything breaks down. He will jump in. Please, Christian, can you quickly say hello?
Yes, hello and good evening to everybody.
Good evening.
Okay, so before I will introduce the panelists, let me just quickly say something about the topic tonight. As I said, we would like to have a look at where the peace process in South Sudan currently stands and why it has stalled repeatedly in the past. Why are there still armed conflicts and serious human rights violations despite the peace agreement that was found and the new unity government that was put in place in February 2020. We would like to have a look at the role of the churches and the civil society in South Sudan, and also see how Switzerland supports peace in South Sudan. Then we want to have a look at what the prospects are for sustainable peace in South Sudan in the future. I will show you some guidelines just for you to know if you want to ask a question later when we have a discussion part which is more interactive with everyone who's joining us. You can unmute your microphone, or you can also write your questions into the question and answer box at the bottom of your screen. There you can write them while our discussion is going on, and we will take them up later. So let me introduce the speakers. First of all, I would like to introduce Father James Oyet Latancio to you. He has been the General Secretary of the South Sudan Council of Churches, short SSCC, since 2015. He's a Catholic priest and he holds a PhD in philosophy. As SSCC General Secretary, he works in partnership with many different organizations in South Sudan and also with the churches, and particularly in initiatives to enhance peace building, healing, and reconciliation in South Sudan. The SSCC plays a crucial role in building sustainable peace through the implementation of the Action Plan for Peace, which is supported by all the churches in South Sudan. Then I would like to introduce to you Rajab Mohandis, who is the Executive Director of the Organization for Responsive Governance and the coordinator of the South Sudan Civil Society Forum. He's a co-signatory to the current peace agreement to resolve the conflict in the Republic of South Sudan, and he represents civil society in the oversight mechanism of the current peace agreement, which has a very complicated name. It's called the Reconstituted Joint Monitoring and Evaluation Commission, short RJMEC, RJMEC. Rajab Mohandis has extensive experience working for national and international organizations, always representing civil society. Then I would like to introduce to you Joanne Holigan. She is Switzerland's Human Security Advisor in South Sudan. The Swiss Federal Department of Foreign Affairs supports the South Sudan Council of Churches, traditional authorities, youth dialogues, and governance programs as part of its peace-building efforts. Before joining the Federal Department of Foreign Affairs in 2018, Joanne worked for the International Committee of the Red Cross in the Democratic Republic of Congo, Syria and Uganda, supporting South Sudanese and Congolese refugees to reunite with their loved ones and their families. So let me just give you a few basic facts before we start about the current situation of the peace process in South Sudan. I will not introduce the topic at length. I imagine that quite a few people who are joining us tonight have extensive knowledge of this conflict. I would just mention a few basic, like a basic timeline and a few basic facts, just for those who are not so familiar with the conflict in South Sudan, so you may follow the discussion later a bit more easily. So what we'll be talking about is the civil war in South Sudan, which took place roughly between 2013 and 2018, though the transitional unity government was only instituted in 2020 in February this year. The conflict was between the Sudan People Liberation Movement, which was led or is led by the president at the moment, Salva Kiir, who comes from the Dinka ethnicity, and he was waging war, or the war was between the SPLM and the SPLM-IO, which means the Sudan People's Liberation Movement in opposition, which is led by Riek Machar, who is now the vice president, and he's from the Nuer ethnicity. There were several ceasefire agreements, but the one that is currently in place is from September 2018, and it also has a very complicated name. It's called the Revitalized Agreement on the Resolution of the Conflict in South Sudan, short the RARCS. I am not sure if I am pronouncing this correctly, but anyway, it's RARCCS, as you can see on the slide. A few words about the government. So this government is called Revitalized Transitional Government of National Unity, RTGONU, and it's a coalition between the opposition and the government, as I just explained beforehand. Yes, so just to remind you, the president is Salva Kiir from the SPLM and the vice president is Riek Machar. At the moment, this government is still in place, but we will hear more about this shortly. Then, just to tell you a few of the devastating facts of the civil war. There were about 500,000 dead people. There were 4 million people who were displaced, though I've seen other figures. Some people talk about 7.5 million people who were displaced, and 6 million people acutely are affected by famine. There have been a lot of human rights violations from all the different warring factions in the civil war. So it's not just the two that I mentioned, there are also others. But not to complicate things, I left them away. For us, Mission 21, this topic about the war and the humanitarian crisis in South Sudan is very important, as we have a very long-standing relationship with the Presbyterian Church of South Sudan, and we have been supporting the peace-building efforts of our partner church, but also of the South Sudanese churches, and the churches that launched the Action Plan for Peace in 2016. And we are doing trauma healing work as well as education and advocacy work in South Sudan. So we have a very particular interest in this conflict, and that's why on this International Day of Peace, we would like to talk about the topic. Okay, so that's all from me now. I would like to open the discussion and give our panelists the floor. Please, can you tell us, where does the peace process stand currently, according to your impression? What is working well and what is not working as planned? Maybe Father James, I could give you the floor first.
Thank you very much, all friends, listeners in this webinar. It's a great pleasure talking to you about the hope for lasting peace in South Sudan. It is true, you chose the word hope for this peace in South Sudan. As we celebrate today, the International Day of Peace, people in South Sudan are hopeful for peace. We want peace, we are praying for peace, and we want our partners to accompany us towards peace. In spite of all the peace signed, is 2 years down the line since the revitalized peace has been signed, we are still dogged down in its implementation. So far, the implementation has not been fully done. People keep on hoping against hope. As a churchman, it doesn't help. It is, we are in a desperate situation. When you see the natural disasters coming in, you see the economy crashing down, we don't know where to head to. We always cry like Prophet Habakkuk, oh Lord, how long will this situation be like this? We want this peace only. We don't need anything more than that. We just want the peace. So the peace process, the peace implementation is at a crossroad. It's not completely implemented. We are now 2 years down the line. We don't have a unified army. We have the government, revitalized government formed. We have the governors appointed, -1 governor missing, but without ministers and commissioners. So people, in spite of all the natural disasters, they have no leadership at the grassroots. It's a painful situation, but we as Christians, we have that hope for lasting peace in South Sudan. One day peace will come. As for the details, I will ask Rajab Mohandis to make the details of that. Rajab, Karim.
Okay, thank you very much, the team at Mission 21, and thank you, Father James Fayette. And I'm happy to be on this panel with Joanne. Joanne is a close partner to our organization and has also been supporting us. Yes, the peace process, where is it now? In our discussions as the civil society, we try to divide this the peace process into 2 stages. One stage is what we refer to as process, and process means formation of institutions, discussions, and maybe consensus on outstanding issues and some of these things. And then there is the stage of what we call impact or end states, where we see results or achievement of intended objectives resulting into changes in different aspects of life, for the lives of the citizens, and institutional reforms and some of these things. So if we say where we are, we want to clearly, I mean, at this point we would say we are at the stage of the process. Any achievements that we have made is so largely only in the area of progress. I mean, the process. The process is intended to lead to the intended objectives or realizing the intended objectives of the peace agreement. So in terms of the process, we are establishing institutions. In fact, most of the transitional institutions got established, particularly to implement pre-transitional activities. And as you may know, the implementation period has been divided into two in the agreement. There was 8 months of pre-transitional period, and then there is 36 months of transitional period. Unfortunately, we missed the deadline for the pre-transitional period, and it was extended by 9 months. So we had 17 months instead of 8 months of pre-transition period. So within that period, most of the institutions which were required were all established. Now, at this point, we have quite a number of institutions established for the transitional period, and that is partly the government, national government, and also beginning of the establishment of the state government. We have the process of transitional security arrangements, which is chapter 2, where forces were moved to cantonment areas for screening and then eventually to training centers. These processes did not go consistently as outlined in the peace agreement. And so we are generally at the stage of these processes. But in summary, we had a public perception survey that we conducted in June, particularly about the peace agreement. And this was supported by me, by the Swiss, by Joanne. Citizens that we consulted said, when we asked them whether they saw any changes, any improvement with the implementation of the agreement since it was signed. Interestingly, about 75% said yes, they saw changes, positive changes that came with the implementation. Majorly, the silencing of the guns or cessation of hostilities among the forces of the parties to the peace agreement. And they have also seen improvements in accessibility of roads and also humanitarian access reaching to the needy and some of these few things. And they were positive about the different opposition groups returning to Juba and sitting together, trying to implement the agreement. Those were things they saw as positive, and it gave them some hope. However, when we asked them whether they feel confident about the implementation of the agreement, 86% said they are not hopeful about the implementation, and it is because they still continue to experience most of the pre-war conditions that they had been experiencing. So those challenges have not gone away. There is still intercommunal violence, and coming with this intercommunal violence, all these atrocities, you find abuses of women, and I may not go to the details, but all those happen. Issues of abduction of children in some parts of the country, especially in the eastern part of the country, and of course, loss of lives, displacement of civilians, and also attacks on the roads and all this. So as it stands now, honestly, the agreement has not adequately and effectively translated to peace that helps to improve the conditions of the ordinary citizens. Citizens are so concerned about jobs. As it stands now, people work for months, sometimes over half a year without getting salaries. And people also have the challenge of, the local currency has lost the value so much that at the moment, this still continues to depreciate, and giving and there is no change with the salaries also. You just get the salary the same amount that you were getting 4 or 5 years ago, even when the value drops so much. And so we are in this situation. So currently, I would say, yeah, the status is that the agreement is here. The content obviously is good, can help to transform the country, but the implementation process is what is not really moving quite well. That is where we are. Thank you.
Thank you, Rajab. Father James, I would like to ask you, because you published press statement today, a message of the South Sudan Council of Churches, where you actually criticize the slow implementation of the peace agreement by all the signatories. Can you please say a few words about your criticism of the slow implementation of the peace agreement?
Thank you very much. Actually, in the statement, it was more a concern, the great concern that we observe the slow implementation. The process is there, but it's very slow. And as it moves slowly, it affects the lives and the situation of people, the common man and woman. So that's why our complaint is there. The church in South Sudan expresses deep concern about the slow implementation. There is no seriousness and commitment in giving that bread of peace to the people of South Sudan. Our brothers and sisters in the political arena, those who have signed the agreement, instead of implementing and giving peace to the people, they are discussing what share they should get in regard to positions. That's why we don't have ministers in the states. They are not talking the facts of the peace as such. They are talking about the content of what you to get from that. So this is a great concern. It's very slow. As they go slowly, people are under floods. As they go slowly, the economy is collapsing. As they go slowly, nothing is moving. What hope can remain? There's a common saying, as I wrote there, that a hungry person is an angry and desperate person. What is left of an angry person other than to think of evil and violence and abusing women and grabbing things? Because it's desperate. So the process is ongoing but very slow. The infrastructure is being washed away by the rain. Where are we? Where is the hope? Claudia?
Very important question. Where is the hope? Maybe we can address this later, where the hope is at the moment. I want to stay a bit longer with the peace agreement. Maybe one of you could also comment on the humanitarian crisis that is taking place at the moment.
Joanne wanted to add something.
Oh, sorry, Joanne, sorry, please.
Thank you. I'm not going to add on the humanitarian situation. I'm coming back on what Father James says, because one of his famous sayings is, hope is the last thing to die. So I was hoping to hear this from him now, but maybe later. No, I think Father James and Rajab summarized it very well. I just wanted to add one aspect, which is the aspect of the non-signatories to the peace agreement. An alliance called SOMA, South Sudan Opposition Movement Alliance, which comprises of General Thomas Cirillo, who's very active in Central Equatoria mainly, and also General Paul Malong, who was the former Chief of Staff of the SPLA. We can say on a positive note that the ceasefire has been holding between the main warring parties, but the fact that the non-signatories haven't come on board is a worry. There's been a lot of attacks on civilians by all parties involving NAS, which is the group of Thomas Cirillo in Central Equatoria. And another aspect which I'd like to mention is what is labeled here as intercommunal violence. There's been a sharp spike in these violence in Jonglei, Greater Jonglei, but also in Tonj, Warrap, different states of South Sudan. So on the one hand, we can say the ceasefire is holding, but on the other hand, there's really a lot of violence ongoing in the different regions of South Sudan. And this is worrying. Also coupled with the fact that the security arrangements have not been implemented yet as planned in the REARCs.
Right, so the security arrangements are still not quite implemented. The ceasefire is holding, but there is still intercommunal violence. What is being done at the moment about this situation? Are there any particular efforts to counter this situation or to encourage the powers that be to move further?
I can say a word and then I will pass it to Father James and Rajab, who are better placed than me on this, but there are a lot of efforts. There's one, UNMISS is really trying to push forward the process. They've held a big conference in Juba last week where Father James was present, by the way. There's been a committee formed under one of the other vice presidents, James Wani-Iga, to tackle the issue in Jonglei, but this is not the first committee. A number of committees have been formed in the past. It's been an ongoing issue. It's not new. It's been there for 10, 15, 20, 50 years. However, the level of the violence now is extremely worrying. And SSCC is also trying on their side. So maybe I will pass the floor to Father James on this.
Thank you. Thank you, John. As regard what is ongoing, well, since the communal violence in Greater Jonglei and other parts of the country, we know that all the pains, all the plans are done in Juba. And the church, the Council of Churches in Juba, through the heads of churches, are being engaging the leadership, the political leadership in Juba. Just with one request, give what the people of South Sudan need. That's that hope of peace. We have engaged them, and based as we remember the Rome retreat, all of them promised to deliver peace for the people of South Sudan after the Pope had kissed their legs. In the end, we keep reminding them as the church that, guys, people of South Sudan needs peace. They need lasting peace, lasting and sustainable peace. However, one thing is speaking, they hear from one ear and it goes out of the other ear. So it's very challenging. However, we don't give up. We try to engage them, keep them busy, keep them disturbed in their conscience that the people of South Sudan need peace. And we keep on knocking their doors. At times we get the doors open, at times the doors are locked, but I will always stand at the door there with the hope that they will open and we'll go and tell them the people of South Sudan wants peace, not anything else. So they go on. But Rajab can put something more to
that. Thank you. These efforts are ongoing, efforts from the church and also efforts from the government attempting to address these challenges. But what we see is also quite challenging, that you find these efforts to address the issues, but you also find situations like encouraging defections of soldiers from from forces within the peace agreement, one opposition group, forces from one opposition would defect to the government. They are accepted, and they are also, this is also played out on the national television. The agreement clearly states that the security arrangements clearly state that by the time the agreement was signed, the parties would not engage in recruitment of forces. And so when you see encouragement and acceptance of defections of soldiers, it's an indication of addition of troops, which is in a way recruitment of forces. Now, if there is in good will to restore peace, to work for peace, to address these issues, we would not be seeing some of these kind of things that amount to violation, and also a way of provocations, which appear to be negative, does not project the spirit of the agreement itself. So, positive efforts with negative efforts will nullify themselves, which is the challenging situation. And it's unfortunate that honestly, if I should go back a little bit, the situation we seem to have now appears to be what we fought against for almost half a century. to get South Sudan as an independent country. And we seem to be reproducing the situation that was not desired and that we wanted to become independent to avoid. And that situation kept us in conflicts for almost half a century. And so if we maintain the same conditions, then you would see that it becomes challenging. So one thing that we see as a major challenge to this is that it is about leadership driving the process of the peace, the reconciliation efforts, and if these leaders were to do things differently, the way they did in the CPA time when it was signed in 2005, and the leaders, the opposition groups from the SPLM and from the government, Bashir at the time, moved together with the late John Garang, talking to people. Those are things we would see that would be giving people hope. But as long as these guys, leaders are all here in Juba, and very little is being done to reach out to the people, to inform the people of what is happening, and to be open in the process of implementation and consistent in this process, it gives us a very bad image of the implementation of the agreement. But it charges us as the civil society and of course the church and our partners to be able to exert more efforts to see how things should be done differently.
So you're seeing sort of a divide between the government and the population, and you think that the government should be making more efforts at reaching out to the people. Did I understand that correctly, Rajab?
Exactly. In fact, when we asked people why they felt that the implementation is not, they are not comfortable with the implementation of the agreement, they mentioned three things. One of them was what Joanne mentioned earlier, the issue of opposition to the peace process, the opposition forces that continue to fight the government. They mentioned the issue of the economy, and also, most importantly, they said uncertainties about the peace implementation. There are so much disagreements among the parties, and the parties are not communicating clearly to the citizens. So people really don't understand what is happening with the implementation of the peace agreement. And most of these parties are here in Juba. We would want to see them moving out to speak to the population. That is what would begin to give people hope. And yeah, so this is still missing for now.
So is this also one of the initiatives that you are working on, maybe to involve civil society more? Can you say a bit more about that?
Yes, well, on our part as the civil society, we reach out extensively to the civil population. We share information with them about the implementation of the agreement and what is moving and where people are. And of course, we try to engage, we convene sessions to get the parties to be able to speak out. Of course, of late, this got interrupted by COVID-19 situation. But we're just beginning to be holding meetings. This is just on the start at this moment. But we're trying to push at least that there should be an arrangement for the political leaders to speak out to the country on what is happening, to reach out to the people, and also see for themselves the situation people are going through and hear what people want to see them do. Yeah, it's part of the effort that we're pushing on.
And how are you transmitting these messages to the government?
Well, there are a number of ways that we use. We have been putting out statements like the church put out today, and we've also been meeting and engaging with them, and also we use the media. But what we do now, most of the time, is that we put together targeted messages. We write to authorities that we target. For example, if there's an issue on security and it falls within the mandate of the Ministry of Defense, we write directly to the Minister of Defense and we meet the minister and hold discussions on these issues. And if it's something to do with the national security, for example, we write to them directly. So that is what we do. And we find it quite helpful when you write and you engage in discussions. you get better responses than when we don't engage them directly. So we feel that we would be increasing our direct engagements with the political leaders, and we've been discussing with the church so that we in most cases unify our efforts and build a big base of a critical mass to be able to push on some of these concerns.
Just one last question to you, Rajab. You are part of this oversight mechanism called the RJMC to the peace agreement. How is it possible for you to influence the peace process through this oversight mechanism?
Well, we hold discussions in the plenaries of the commission, and in that regard, we get all reports coming to us, to the commission, and then we provide recommendations. We also hold meetings with the chairperson and the secretariat team, and we provide recommendations, strong recommendations. We have always seen, of course, reports indicating, our report as it stands now indicates, for example, that most of the tasks that were outlined in the metrics of implementation were implemented, were cleared. Unfortunately, when you really measure the outcome, the impact on the ground, the impact is not felt so much, and that is where we try to categorize this in terms of simply processes, but also the impact of the agreement itself to the country. And in that regard, we push for recommendations, and we call on the parties and the region as well. I mean, some of our partners in the region, the grantors and the rest, that we should be honest with the issue of the implementation of the peace agreement. And we caution about, calling on, mentioning out that there's progress happening when in real situation, the progress isn't so much. So we contribute to this institution. Unfortunately, it involves all the partners, regional and international partners, diplomatic missions, and the rest, and the parties are all part of it. So yeah, we share our voices in that regard.
Thank you very much for sharing with us, Rajab. I would like to ask Father James to talk a bit about the action plan for peace. You said that you are trying to influence the leaders by putting out statements and disturbing them in their peace, if I understood correctly. But you're also doing some very concrete things with the action plan for peace. Maybe you could explain to us your activities.
Thank you. Explaining our activities, that realistic opportunity that the church in South Sudan can contribute to the implementation is through the action plan for peace. In South Sudan today, as I speak, the people, the common man and woman, even these political brothers and sisters, they believe and trust in the church. They believe and trust in the church. When we invited them for the Rome process, they accepted willingly. Today, the people at the grassroots trust in the church. They look at the church as the last hope. So the realistic opportunity that the church has today that can contribute is that to call, appeal to the conscience of this leadership, to address them and their responsibility, to call them to task. This is a realistic opportunity that we as the church, since the trust is there, we can keep knocking about. As regards the action plan for peace, there are the three main pillars: the advocacy part, the neutral forum part, and then the reconciliation. But today, with the problem of COVID-19, some activities can't be carried on as regard to social distancing, wearing face masks, and we don't need to gather more than that number stipulated by the authorities in the Ministry of Health. So it has slowed down. However, we keep engaging, like we had some conversation as an awareness for the COVID, but in order to instill in them that we need, as we give the awareness, we need that part of the peace, but we advocate the people that they need to think peace, to talk peace, and when they go to their gardens, they dig in peace. To keep them aware, because today they think that since there's this pandemic, therefore they only keep thinking of other things. But we keep on bringing them to the line that in spite of all this, the action plan of peace process is ongoing. We meet in small for conversation with the communities, like we are being engaging the pastors and the women in Greater Jonglei as regard for this intercommunal violence, child abduction. We have been engaged, we have consulted them, and next Thursday we are going to consult the governor and some ex-governors just to keep them on the hook, to give them the hook of their responsibility before we go and give the ownership to the church on the ground, the church in Malakal, the church in Bor, the church in Pibor, the church in Akobo. The church on the ground is devastated. They need some sign of hope. So through the action plan for peace, through this consultation, we give them the ownership to drive and have a realistic stance on what they want. And they want only peace, that hope for peace. They don't want anything more than that. So the process of the action plan for peace is ongoing, facing the challenge of COVID-19, but realistically, we keep on knocking, keep on pushing, keep on moving. We have tried and we keep on trying because the trust is there. The people of South Sudan trust us. They look at us with hope. Wherever you go, where is the church? That's the question. When you go where is the church? So the church is present. We are the church. It's not a building. We are the church. To give that concrete hope, to give that cemented opportunity of the trust they've given us, to let them that, no, there's a good morning for South Sudan to come. There's a good next day that we need to see. However, this is a challenge that comes, but the process is ongoing because all of us have grown in this war. All of us have been ordained priests in this war. We have worked in this war. We are still working in this war. Maybe we shall die in this war. But my hope is that I need to die in a peaceful time that I can give to the people of South Sudan. So it's a process. We are moving with your support.
Thank you, Father. Pardon?
Joanne.
Thank you, Father James. I would like to give the word to Joanne Holigan. Maybe you can talk a bit about Switzerland's program in South Sudan. I know that you have very extensive activities and how you are intending to support peace in South Sudan.
Sure, thanks, Claudia. Yeah, we have different axes of support around dialogue and creating spaces for dialogue, but also on governance. I think in this panel you have two of our important partners currently, Father James and the South Sudan Council of Churches. So with the SSCC, our main aim is really to support in the background, more on the process and some technicalities around facilitation and mediation. I mean, the church are the ones with the knowledge, with the contacts, they're the ones on the ground. So the role that Switzerland can play here is really supporting more on the technical aspects of processes, mediation skills, facilitation skills, which was also done last year. They have an amazing conveying power in South Sudan, probably the biggest that anyone has here. To give you an example, last year, there was issues with the South Sudan Opposition Alliance, who were to get a position of vice president. So IGAD, the lead mediator, tried to call them and get them together on a number of times. They never all came at once. When the South Sudan Council of Churches called them, they all came. So we really see an extremely strong added value in the work that the church can do in South Sudan. Then with civil society, also a lot of the work is really listening to a variety of different actors, those that have access to high-level elites, those that are well embedded at the grassroots, and then see how Switzerland can support some of the processes of civil society in terms of supporting peace and implementing the peace. We've also more recently in the past year, we've been engaging with the Ministry of Federal Affairs. In the peace agreement, there is a call for federalism in South Sudan. It's been a long call that's been going on for years. It's somehow enshrined in the transitional constitution of 2011, but it's more decentralization than federalism. There's a constitution making process that is to take place with this new peace agreement with the RIARCs. So Switzerland here is willing and ready to help in that process. Currently, what we're focusing on is to support the Ministry of Federal Affairs on creating an understanding on what federalism is, because there's still a lot of fears and misunderstanding of this word and of what it might implicate. There's also a federalism working group that's been formed with members of the opposition, members of the government, MPs, etc., who have started to work with national experts and international experts on what type of federalism could suit South Sudan. Then we work also with the chiefs, traditional authority leaders, through a partnership with Rift Valley Institute, acknowledging that in many areas of South Sudan, chiefs still have a very big role to play, whether in peace or in war, also in terms of customary law and justice. So we're engaging with them through this partnership with the Rift Valley Institute. And then maybe you asked early on a question on the humanitarian situation. We are working with a resource facility on conflict-sensitive humanitarian assistance, engaging a number of donors to ensure that the humanitarian assistance is conflict-sensitive and doesn't contribute more to some of the issues on the ground, war, marginalization, etc. So I think in a nutshell, this is basically what I can say. Of course, a lot of the work is also networking and finding entry points for Switzerland in different dialogue forums or facilitation forums. But at the moment, we're really doing this through or supporting the SSCC, who are the better placed for such work.
Thank you, Joanne. I just want to ask you a question, because you mentioned in the talk we had before the webinar that you are also supporting reconciliation efforts between the different parties, especially the strategy which is mentioned in Chapter 5 of the peace agreement. Can you talk a bit about what you're doing there?
Yeah, we are not yet really into it. We are looking now, we're going to be supporting soon a program around Coalition of Victims or Coalition of Survivors, which is aimed at strengthening the voices of the victims on the ground in different locations of South Sudan. And we are doing this with grassroots national organizations linked with some high-level personalities that have the right access to put the topic on the national agenda, but also involving neighboring countries and the international community at large. This has not started yet. It should start on the 1st of October. But we do feel when we talk about the state of the peace agreement that this whole part of truth, reconciliation, healing will be really crucial for sustainable peace in South Sudan. There's so much trauma, so much hatred still amongst different communities, and justice as we might perceive it in Western countries, or the hybrid court which is called for in the peace agreement, are more than likely not going to happen in the very near future. So there's really a need on the side to work on reconciliation and healing of the affected communities.
Thank you. Father James, pardon, please go on.
No, yeah, just one last thing in terms of our support. We also have a Swiss advisor, governance advisor, that's working with RJMC on governance issues. So that's an additional support that Switzerland is providing through a governance expert.
Thank you very much. Father James, could you please also comment on the issue of reconciliation? Because I know that this is one of the strands of the Action Plan for Peace. How are you working for reconciliation?
Thank you, Claudia. The reconciliation is the third pillar of the Action Plan for Peace. as we keep moving the process of Chapter 5 of the agreement, that's about the hybrid court and blah, blah, it's not easy to, it's not something going to happen soon. So there's too much hate in South Sudan. There's too much revenge in South Sudan. There's too much trauma that is very overwhelming. To reconcile, as we stress in the action plan for peace, is not easy. It's not easy. To forgive somebody who has wronged you, who have killed your relative, who have raped, who have abused your sister, who have done chaos in your family or in your community, is not just a quick fix. It's a process. There is a perpetrator, and then there's also a victim in all this process. So we need to heal, as we heal the victim, because most in the reconciliation process, in the trauma process, people talk only of the victims. But in action plan for peace, we talk of the victims and the perpetrators. To give, the perpetrator needs to be given a chance to realize that he or she is on the wrong, and his conscience is disturbing him as a Christian. So in the reconciliation process, we take people through the process of trauma healing, the trauma of being abused, the trauma of being raped, the trauma of seeing your family member killed in your presence. The thing remains, the trauma of seeing the dead, somebody being killed in front of you, somebody is innocent. So this trauma hinders the reconciliation process. So as a pillar in the action plan for peace, we are working on the trauma process to heal people from these pains of revenge, to heal them from the trauma of the stigma of the abuse, of the being sexual abuse. Today in South Sudan, the sexual gender violence is just, you get a woman being abused, although she's well dressed. So we are going through the process of trauma healing, but South Sudanese are not easily to open up. Somebody who has got that stigma, that pain, he or she keeps for himself. He keeps silent. Even that perpetrator, he wants to speak, he keeps them. So we have created a psychosocial and trauma care helpline here in the council, where this victim with a stigma is a toll-free number. You call, you get a counselor, a church leader, a mother to listen to you. You start that dialogue, it gives you the opportunity to talk, because South Sudanese don't want to speak to a person that they don't know. They can see he's a priest, he's an elder in the church, but if he doesn't know him or her, he's not ready to talk. So through the psychosocial trauma care helpline services, you call, you speak out your pains. Even perpetrators are calling because they are being haunted by the pains of all these our people. So in that regard, as they break the wall of division between their stigma and their pains, they come back, they come to meet the counselors in the council here, and we keep on guiding them until even the perpetrators have come. Today, there are some perpetrators who want to meet their victims just because of the psychosocial and trauma care helpline, just to break this wall. Then when they meet, there's an occasion to reconcile. This is how we are moving. It's slow, it's a process, it's difficult when you have gone through the ordeal of pain, but it's achievable, and we are doing it. Thank you.
I'm quite impressed. So you actually managed to have meetings between victims and perpetrators. It happens, Father James. You have to turn on your microphone.
The victims, between victims and perpetrators, we have brought one or two of them that have met already here. We keep it silent because it's just to protect the perpetrator and the victim, because they have to come out of this situation. Until they come out to public, they say, I have done this, I've done this. Then the law will take its course. Because the perpetrators have realized, the one who came, who have been guided through the trauma helpline service, came out and started expressing that I can't sleep because I've raped this woman. How can I meet this woman? I told him, the woman I cannot meet you because you have caused pain and stigma in her life. But let us go slowly. When we met, there was no hug, but just that occasion of seeing and talking, the courage of forgiving comes in, with the power of God, of course. And the courage of saying, I can extend you my hand to break that wall. But the pain is still, the wound is still there. As we go through the counseling part, the trauma healing process, we heal that wound and we make it. Claudia?
Fascinating. I'm impressed. Thank you very much for sharing with us. Before I open the floor to the people who are participating in the webinar so they can ask questions, I just want to ask a last question. What do you think is most needed at the moment to improve the situation in South Sudan? Maybe Rajab, you could comment?
Yeah, okay, thank you. The situation as it stands now requires a combination of actions. One would say the local level peace efforts need to continue. What Father James is talking about. And I can pull an example from Lakes State, which is one of the most violent states in the country. There have been lots of community peace dialogues and peace agreements signed. And those community peace agreements were so helpful. And in December, we had a commissioners forum in the state, and the commissioner said they were surviving because of those agreements. And they agreed to normalize relations and also to move away from targeting a community when an individual causes a problem to jointly, communities joining hands to target individuals who go and either kill or raid cattle and some of these things. And they also moved on to say they would accept the government to set up mobile courts to try cases of murder so that they would not go for revenge and some of these things. The situation we have now is that the national government doesn't have sufficient capacity to deliver peace in the immediate term to the whole country. And so at each level, there is need for people to dialogue, discuss with the local government and the community leaders to agree on what they see as peace for themselves, and they protect that as the national government sorts out itself. And then, of course, the local level efforts would always require the support of the national government. And there is need to push strongly that the national government actually makes itself effectively functional in the process of this reorganization. I think that's where I would leave it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Rajab. Joanne, I would like to put the same question to you.
Thank you, Claudia. I think they've summed it up very well. One thing which also comes to my mind is really a sense of identity for South Sudan, some sort of nationalism, which through support that we've provided in dialogues among the youth, especially, is still really missing. It's very hard to when you ask young people in South Sudan, what makes you a South Sudanese? I feel like there's sometimes a lack of, I don't know, understanding what is their national identity. So I think there's a lot of work to be done on this. Also, of course, as both Father James and Rajab have mentioned, I mean, reforms in governance, in the economic sector, all of this, that the country is in dire need of development and of economic opportunities. And this will be one of the key aspects which may sustain peace or not, is if the young people in this country, who make up 72% of the population, if they don't have any opportunities to work and to make money, it will be hard to move away from some of these cycle of violence. So I think really, I hope that this peace agreement will bring peace dividends and economic opportunities and development, because this is what is really, in my external view, desperately needed in South Sudan.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Rajab?
Yes, if I can add something quickly. Well, the chapter 1 of the peace agreement actually states that the church and the civil society may lead the process of reconciliations and healing. It is something that we need to pick up and push through jointly as the civil society and as the church, because as Joanne rightly mentioned, our young people are badly divided. When you follow them on the social media, people are so much divided, say along political lines, following these political leaders, and mostly along ethnic lines. And that makes it easy for them to be polarized, to be mobilized for confrontations and for violence. And if we do not help the young people to pull together, it will always be easier to divide them along these lines, and also create, push them towards violence more and more. So the element of reconciliation is important, and it's something that we really need to push strongly together as the church and the civil society and other stakeholders.
Thank you for this addition. Father James, would you also like to comment?
Yes, Claudia, it is true. This element, there's too much hate in South Sudan. I suffer from this pain. Too much hate, too much revenge, and it affects even me as a pastor. It affects me as a priest. I want to be very clear to all the friends of Mission 21. The thing, usually I say, the blood of Christianity or the blood of our ethnicity, the blood of my tribe is thicker than the blood of my faith, than the water of my baptism. I hope you understand. We are too much taken up by our ethnic divide. It is more stronger than saying Jesus is Lord. It disturbs a lot. That's why today the process of reconciliation is that we need to heal. This is my pastors, this is my priests, the bishops. We need to heal them from this pain, from this trauma of being driven by where they come from. However, through the Council of Churches, we are reaching out this. We are touching this. My sister Dorina somewhere should be listening. She knows it, what we have been doing. We did with her, and we are still doing with her. So the process of healing this tribal division, where we give the hand to the youth to implement, is very painful. But there's that hope for the lasting peace in South Sudan. Claudia?
Thank you very much, Father James. Maybe we have more time to discuss this very important topic of reconciliation and healing. But I would like to open the floor now for people to ask questions. You can put your questions in the question and answer box at the bottom of your screen, or you can also just turn on your microphone and ask your question if you like. I am giving the word now, the floor now to my colleague Christian, because he's been monitoring the different chat boxes. Please, Christian.
Yes, we had just a question from Bill to Father James. Christianity has been hampered by conflict, difficult communication, suspicion of some leaders. Is there a need for re-evangelization as part of the peace-building process?
Yes, that's the right question. It's the right question. Christianity has been injured by this, in South Sudan especially. Our Christian faith has been injured by our tribal belongings, our tribal identity, our tribal makeup, to the point we look more to our tribal identity than to look at our Christian faith. We don't look at that Jesus. You can see when you come to South Sudan, people sing, people say hallelujah, but there's that what blocks them. However, we need to inculturate and change this, root out this deep, because it hampers national peace building, it hampers national identity. When you ask, who are you? Instead of saying I'm South Sudanese, you say I am Father Jim from this tribe. instead of saying, I'm this and that is it. National identity and national, what they call nation building. This is a thing. So the question is true. We need to re-evangelize our tribes. We need to evangelize our culture. We need to evangelize where we came from, our roots. Most of the roots are ups and downs. So we need to make it Christian so that it reflects our Christian faith. So it comes back, the blood of our ethnicity is thicker than the grace of the baptism of our Christianity. So, but we need to break this taboo. It's a taboo, but we can break it. Re-evangelizing the cultures.
Perhaps I can add a second question. You already mentioned a bit this aspect. Is the nation building and building of national identity, is it on the agenda of the NGOs and so on? Or is it not yet seen as a main task?
Well, the issue of nation building and national identity, it's it's haunting us. In South Sudan, we are far behind. We are far behind in regard to nation building and national identity. We need to work on it. It's a way that we need to work on it. It's not that it's to be written somewhere and we work on it. It's what we need in order to counter all these ethnic divisions, these tribal divisions, this hate. At times, somebody is not hated because he has done a mistake. He's hated because he belongs to that tribe. I remember in 2016, on the 10th of July, in Terrain Hotel, a Nuer young man, a journalist, a simple young man, he was about 27 years old. He was not killed because he was an enemy of the government. He was killed because he belonged to that tribe called Nuer. They shot him on the head. I had to cover him with a cloth because that was a human being. Today he has died, not because he was an enemy. He was with his friends at the Internews group in that hotel. He was a journalist, but he lost his life because he was a Nuer. Can you imagine these pains, lack of nation building, lack of national identity, which is referred to tribe? Christian?
Thank you.
Yeah.
I give.
Maybe some of the other panelists could also comment on this question of national identity and nation building. What do you think about this? Raja, please.
Excellent. Yeah, thank you very much. We can do all our efforts combined will give a push and maybe pressure. But ultimately, we need a unified national government that drives most of this agenda. National unity, national identity, nation building are partly political processes that are easily driven by political establishments. And what we lack is that political establishment that can pull us together. If anything, the political arrangements that we currently have and the individuals who lead these political arrangements, in fact, create even more divisions among the people. They fragment the South Sudanese nationalities instead of building a South Sudanese identity and a nation out of the different nationalities in the country. And so our role would be to push on this to the national agenda that it is implemented. And no matter how much we do all this, we will still require a effective functional government with a clear agenda to drive us through this. And this has been clearly stipulated in, I've always referenced our text of the Declaration of Independence and also the literature that were there before we became independent, articulating exactly what we would need to be a united South Sudanese nation. And so it's a long journey that we really have, and partly because as it stands now, our political establishment is very weak and fragmented, and that makes it really difficult. If anything, some of these political leaders actually want this fragmentation because they draw support out of this to back themselves along ethnic lines, unfortunately.
Thank you, Rajab. Joanne, would you like to comment as well?
Could we just
yes, I know, I've seen it.
Okay.
I just want to ask Joanne so we can round up.
Okay, no, really not much to add on my side. I agree with Rajab on the need for political example on this. There are efforts being done on the ground, but it's drops in the ocean in comparison to the magnitude of the problem, I feel. One hope maybe would be, again, this constitution making process, if it's done with really the participation of the people in all the states, it might be able to generate some feeling of ownership and some identity to South Sudan as a whole. But yeah, otherwise I really don't have much to add to what Father James and Rajab have already mentioned.
So there was a participant who raised his hand, Ferdinand von Habsburg, but I don't see him in the participants list anymore. So we probably lost the connection. Maybe he will come back later. You probably all saw his message in the chat box, greeting everyone here. He's quite a well-known person actually in South Sudan, so and has been connected to the country for many years. So we'll go on, maybe he will come back, I'm hoping so. There are more questions raised. There is one question to Rajab saying that you raised a very important point regarding the creation of hope to the people of South Sudan by the two main principles: first, showing unity between themselves, and then preaching unity across the country. It has been hampered by COVID. Alina is asking the question if the church and the civil society organizations are able to reach out and give this advice to the president and the first vice president by issuing statements, for example. Rajab, this question goes to you.
Yes, thank you. We have been releasing statements and outlining what we see as priorities for these parties. When RIAC was released from South Africa to Addis, we wrote to them what we call the citizens' agenda. We told them we didn't know what IGAD wanted them to discuss because a meeting was organized for them. But we said this is the citizens' agenda. We gave them 5 points, and one of them was that they should move the meeting beyond themselves and meet with the rest of the opposition groups at that time, and also make clear public statement, joint public statement, and that they should move from Addis to South Sudan and should be able to move around the country to tell the people that yes, there is peace now. And we have always called on that to happen. Unfortunately, for their own reasons, they are stuck so much in Juba. And even when they are here in Juba, the element of speaking out to the public and telling the people, yes, peace has come and this isn't appearing so clear. And for that reason, citizens continue to feel concerned, especially about elements of disagreements that come around. And so part of the aspect of promoting reconciliation is actually to get the parties to move out, and that is what we can do with the church, to move, to push that they take the lead, to speak to the country, to give messages of hope. And then there is this question, if I can add to it quickly, the element of supply of weapons to the greater Jonglei area.
Yes.
The scale of the violence increased if you follow the latest violence that happened. And there is also the element of sophistication of the weapons used in this violence. None of these civilians in Jonglei went to some countries around the world to buy weapons. And so it has been said here in Juba repeatedly that they actually get these weapons from Juba to the States, unfortunately. It may not be an open government arrangement, but individuals within the political establishments and the military establishments are linked to the communities, the three major communities that are always in conflict in the greater Jonglei area, including the greater Pibor administrative area, of course. And so some of their people who have access to these weapons try to give them these weapons in a manner that provides them a kind of a protection. And these weapons, of course, end up being used the wrong way. So it's a serious point of concern. And we hope that this access to weapons would be, there should be full control on these weapons by the national authorities to avoid getting these weapons out to the people. But now that people already have these weapons really in large numbers, we need to find a way, first of all, to get these communities to agree to live peacefully, even when they have the weapons, as mechanisms are developed and strengthened to enable the government to remove these weapons gradually from the hands of the civilians.
Thank you very much, Rajab, for explaining the situation. I saw that Ferdinand von Habsburg came back online, and he's been raising his hand for quite some time, so I would like to give him the floor. Welcome, please.
I'm afraid that his connection isn't stable. Ah, okay. Now. Ferdinand, could you tell us if you are there?
He's trying to establish a connection, I think. We can see his name on the screen, but we don't hear him. I gave you the permission to speak, so please. Ah, there we go.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, you're breaking up a lot, but we can hear you.
Can you hear me?
Yes. Not anymore, I'm afraid. Oh, so yeah.
Something regarding the ethnic conflict in Jonglei.
Pardon? I didn't get that.
Something regarding the ethnic conflict in Jonglei regarding the weapons.
Yes, Rajab just...
Feel unrest. It's true, the ethnic conflict in Jonglei is something very complex. And during our consultation, the women group that we met from the three tribes, the Nuer, the Murle, and the Jeng, they said there's a big hand in the conflict there. And the weapons being used are too complex and modern. They are new weapons. And those people are naked, They don't have dresses, they don't have clothes, but they've got these modern weapons that they use. The question comes, where do you get the weapons? If not some guys within the establishment here getting the things there, whether on the side of the Murle, whether on the side of the Nuer, whether on the side of the Jeng. So it's just some issues to be sorted out in Juba, and they take it to the grassroots to sort it out there. So this is the sad situation. The problem is here in our town here in the capital, because they send the satellite phones to those youth there. They send them the modern weapons, and it's very funny. Somebody very ignorant. He knows only the number of his boss in Juba using the satellite phone. It's a very funny situation. However, I don't know, but unless these are people realize that they are responsible of the destiny of the innocent people, that's the bad situation. You can imagine a Murle holding a phone like this, satellite phone. Where does he get it from? He never went to school. A Jeng holding a satellite phone like this, where does he get it from? A Nuer holding such to communicate with somebody here in Juba, and he knows the number of that person. When it comes to the situation, it just dials. We are out of bullets. So these guys will sort out a process, a method of reaching out to them. So the issue in Juba is being transferred to the grassroots. I'm sorry, Bill, is that the situation? The pains are there. There are people in the establishment supplying the weapons, in short. Thank you.
Yeah, if I can mention something small.
Sure, please go ahead. And then there's 2 more questions left. Yeah.
Okay, in December 2014, in my hometown, Maridi, our commissioner was driving around the county visiting people around the Christmas time, and he got a young man with a brand new weapon. That's the type that is given to one of the that is only with one of the security sector here in Juba. And they asked this young man, "Where did you get this weapon?" And he said, "Well, I am a policeman in a cattle camp here in the bush." And so you can see someone right in the middle of the bush with such a brand new weapon that is just brought for one of the security sector. You would know that these weapons are actually brought for the national institutions, but then delivered down to the...
Thank you very much. There are 2 more questions. One question is about the youth population in South Sudan. If there are any efforts by the government and the international community to enable youth to earn their livelihood meaningfully, given the economic situation, which is quite dire at the moment. Who would like to come in on this?
Okay, let me share just a few things on this. The economic situation, of course, is bad, and we don't see any hope of revitalizing the economy with the crisis going on. The roads are not safe. People can't move goods and services. Besides being not safe, the roads are badly dilapidated, and so it makes economic activities a little bit challenging. The agreement clearly provides arrangements for support to the youth. There is a provision for Youth Enterprise Development Fund. There is a provision for Women Enterprise Development Fund. And there is no discussion on these issues. There's no discussion on the whole chapter 4 of the economic reforms, serious discussions and implementation of those reforms as it stands now. And so we believe that until the security situation is improved and then the economic arrangement is implemented, it will be difficult to help change the situation for the young people. So the push should still be that the situation improves. Yeah.
Thank you. Joanne, would you like to comment on this as you are holding youth dialogues? Maybe you can say something about the place of the youth today and how they're feeling.
No, I can add a little something on what Rajab says, and maybe from the donor perspective. And indeed, in South Sudan right now, I don't know the percentage, but I would say that 95% of the funds are still for humanitarian aid and not for development. And that comes in part to the lack of security, and a bit donors are a little bit scared of the future as they've burned their wings in the past. So I think there's really a need for this transitional government to show that they are moving forward for stability and trying to enforce the security arrangements for development money to flow in. There are certain initiatives in supporting youth in small businesses and enterprises here and there in certain hubs of stability, but it remains very marginal. And I think for the shift in donors' money to go more towards development and these type of activities, there's really a need for more security in the country. Yeah.
Thank you. So I see that Ferdinand von Habsburg has come back online. Maybe you can unmute your microphone and try again. Please, you have the floor, Ferdinand. We can't hear you, I'm afraid. Maybe you can write your question or your message in the chat box or in the question and answer box, and we can try to answer it. Unfortunately, we cannot hear you. Okay.
Good evening. I hope you can hear me. Good evening. Thank you very much. I wanted to greet the panelists very much, people I worked with for many years. So greetings to all of you and warm wishes.
Yeah. Ferdinand has disappeared from my screen. I don't know about everyone else. I'm sorry. Again, maybe you want to write it in the chat box. We would love to hear from you. Father James, you're raising your hand. Would you like to say something?
Yes, there's a question from Dorina.
Yes.
Because I mentioned about the hybrid court. And then the question, do you think it will be possible to have lasting peace without dealing with the past, without bringing the perpetrators to trial? It's difficult to have lasting peace if you don't deal with the past. The past will be hanging on you. So in any process, as we work now, most of these perpetrators are armed. They have got guns in their hands. If you try to drag them to the court of trial or in the hybrid court, they will shoot you before you go through the process. So we have been discussing with some of the human rights friends in the UN that we need to collect the data. We need to take notes, even photos, evidence, because if we try to talk of this hybrid code now and try to implement it, they will shoot you. The president and this first vice president, I remember there was a time they were interviewed here in Juba as regard, that should be in 2016, before the crisis. They were interviewed and the thing was published in the United States, the article. Both of them were on the same page. President Kiir and his first vice president, Dr. Riek Machar, were on the same page against the hybrid court, against any issue of dealing with the past in regard to justice. So it's a very delicate issue. However, you can't build peace. You can't have a hope of peace if you don't work on the past. It is challenging, but it's worth taking. The perpetrators who come ahead realize that they need to liberate themselves from this pain because it's haunting them. But there are some perpetrators who believe in the arms they carry. And believing in that arms, they will not need to hear anything about justice or anything. Today in South Sudan, talk of justice. Immediately you'll be attacked. They'll attack you. Somebody they call unknown gunmen will come and look for you where you live. So this one cannot derail us from dealing with the past. We must deal with the past in order to heal for a hopeful future, a peaceful future, a lasting peace. Claudia?
Thank you very much, Father James. Joanne, I see that you've turned on your microphone. Did you want to come in?
No, sorry. No.
Okay, thanks. So I'll try one last time with Ferdinand von Habsburg. I see that you've come online again. So please try to address us. I hope we can hear you. Otherwise, there's always the possibility of writing into the chat box. Please, Ferdinand, you have the floor.
Thanks. My apologies if this doesn't work, but thank you. Just a question about generational conflict and the understanding that 3 generations have gone, and that the agreement hasn't reached communities really, but under my providing the weapons. So how to go around leaders as well as through them seems to be the challenge. And education would be one tool, but not only for children, but also for youth and adults, in addition to existing ones, and how to move it to rural areas and beyond the urban. So I see that the change of behavior and opening minds was not. So I it from a CS perspective and a government of Switzerland perspective. Thank you.
Thank you, Ferdinand. So I think the question was about, if I understood this correctly, how to go around young people taking up arms and moving more towards education and providing them with income in the future, and especially for the rural areas. I hope I understood this correctly. Who would like to come in on this?
Let me start.
Please.
Okay, education is key to counter generational conflict on a mass scale, especially for children, youth, and adults. And today in South Sudan, we have got these former child soldiers, children who have been conscripted by force to the army to fight, because they don't have any background, they only have the target ahead of them. So based on this, we need to educate these young, because the elders, the big people already, it's not like pruning a big tree. It's not easy. You just need to cut it. You don't prune. But for the children, we can prune them, educate them, invest in education to let them grow. We need to let them grow in the spirit of understanding, in the spirit of reasoning, in the spirit of seeing that the other is not an enemy, the other is not a bad person, in seeing that we are South Sudanese, not that tribe that I come from, to see that we are what God has made us to be. This you can do it through education, through the education that we need to give to these children for the future. Because present is a war already. We are still in war. The present time we just want to sort it out, to let the people understand something, to cease the violence, to cease the revenge, to cease the anger, to cease this brutal life, just like what you call the action plan for peace, to change the narrative from that of violence, that of rape, to that of peace. Want to do it to our children because they are the future. The elders are already rough. They have got all this, they are perpetrators, let me say. They are perpetrators. They teach their children violence. They were the first thing, some who have got guns, they show the child, this is for your defense. A child doesn't need a gun. A child is innocent. So we need to invest in education to prepare children for tomorrow, because the South Sudan of tomorrow, not the South Sudan of today. Because we are born in this, we are working in this, maybe we shall also die in this. Rajab can answer more.
Okay, yeah, thank you very much. Of course, education is extremely important to transform society. However, as it stands now, we can still govern ourselves, because we do not expect in the next 5 to 10 years or 20 years that all our citizens will acquire some level of education given the current situation. And when you see, in fact, our violence in the country now starts from Juba, and then it is disseminated to the rest of the country. It starts where we have PhD holders, and some of those who perpetrate this violence and divide the communities are actually highly educated. And I was in Kakuma in February for a small program with Mission 21, and we were told of a situation where some South Sudanese in Australia mobilized funds and mobilized young people in Kakuma refugee camp, who then went and killed another young man. You would see that all of them were educated people. So what we want to do actually is that there should be punishment, the element of justice. When people begin to face punishment for the crimes they commit, people will begin to fear committing crimes. As it stands now in South Sudan, someone can walk out to shoot you and goes away and easily gets away with it. So if we do not establish, strengthen these institutions, it is from the governance background, politics and governance. My belief is that there should be a government that provides direction and governs the country. When that falls down, that collapses, everything else goes wrong. So that is where we have a very serious challenge. Anyone does anything, the government doesn't have sufficient capacity to address it, and it doesn't have the will in some situations to address it. So that is where we are. For now, we're going to struggle with illiterate and uneducated people and so on. And those who keep peace in our communities are chiefs who have never gone to school. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Rajab. We're already past the end time that we announced, so the discussion is very interesting, but I would like to wrap up here. We have to change the narrative of war towards a narrative of peace. I'm quoting Father James here. I think this is a very important message, and it applies to many different walks of life here in Switzerland, but also in South Sudan. I really want to thank our panelists for having taken the time to join us tonight and to share their experiences and their wisdom and their knowledge with us. We are working here for peace in South Sudan, trying to support all the different actors in South Sudan. Thank you very much for your commitment, Rajab, James, and Joanne in South Sudan. I would like to draw your attention to Mission 21's campaign, which is about a dream for peace in South Sudan, where we are trying to support the peace process. You can find more information on our website.